Hey, it's Rod Yates. Welcome to another episode of Humans of Music, a Jaxsta podcast. Each episode, I talk to a music creator or industry professional about their life and career, the ups and downs of their journey, and the lessons they've learned. And my special guest today is Shamir. Shamir recently released his latest album, Heterosexuality. It's a really personal album, this one, because while in the past Shamir has sung about his identity as a queer non-binary person, he says this is the first time he's really tackled his relationship as a queer person with the binary heterosexual world. And I should point out that I spoke with Shamir about which pronouns he's comfortable with me using, and he replied that he, his, him is okay, which is why I'm referring to him in that way. Heterosexuality is Shamir's 8th full-length record, but the path to this point has been anything but linear. After signing to British indie label Excel at the age of 19 and releasing acclaimed debut album Ratchet in 2015, Shamir then split with the label due to creative differences and released his second album, Hope, on SoundCloud for free. After recovering from a psychotic episode, Shamir immersed himself in the Philadelphia indie scene and released 5 DIY albums in less than 3.5 years. We talk about that journey in this interview, as well as Shamir's upbringing in the Nation of Islam, the label he founded, Accidental Popstar Records, and much more. But we started by talking about Shamir's latest album, Heterosexuality. I think I've seen you talk about the album and the fact that it was pretty much the first time that you didn't go into this with a mission statement. Mm-hmm. What do you mean by that?
With every record up until now, they're always, I kind of, always, knew, the mission statement, just overall what I was trying to say. I know that, the record that I released previously, my self-titled, I knew that record was, dealing with coming of age and, my youth and my past, I guess, as I felt I was moving away from my youth, because I was 25 when I did a lot of that. And at 25, I kind of felt like I fully said goodbye to my youth. And so a lot of even the clips that divided the songs in that record was literally clips from my early 20s and when I was 19, 20, 21. And so I knew, I knew where it was, whereas for this, yes, it's clear that I'm talking about my relationship with the cishet world as a queer person. I don't know how someone else could take that. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Everyone has their own version of, coming of age. But as far as people's relationship to the cishet world, that is just really different. That differs. So, with this record, I say, take from it what you need or what you can take from it, because to me, it's just super personal, and I can't expect everyone to experience the same way that I experience it.
Sure. I mean, how would you describe that relationship with the cishet world that you have and that you were trying to capture in the record?
Full of strife. Yeah. And even, in reproductive, I say all the strife within me, so much that it's almost comical. Yeah. And kind of making peace with the fact that, there may never be, at least in my lifetime, a point where there is more of a balm. I think it's kind of also making peace with the strife and not letting it discourage me from my path.
Right. Coming to that when did you come to that realization, do you think, or to that?
As I was writing the record, honestly,
Really?
The record was very therapeutic for me, yeah, for sure.
Right. So were there revelations in the album as you were writing it?
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah, I would say that it was because the entire writing process was fairly quick. It was about 2 months that from the first demo that we did to finishing it, at least finishing demo it before we went up to the Poconos to track it. And yeah, it felt therapeutic. It felt like I was, that's why this is definitely my most personal record so far, because normally I don't write in the midst of my feelings, and I'm often quite normally against that. I think it's best to process your feelings first before you kind of delve into it with your art. But these also still were concepts that I was already kind of dwelling on. Mm-hmm. And I think, writing this record kind of helped me, close the book on it, basically.
Yeah, that feels like that would be a huge moment. Did you feel like a different person when you left the studio as opposed to...
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Absolutely, yes. I feel like a different person now. I feel like I got so much off my chest with the record, and it feels good, and I feel better.
That's great.
And wiser. and older.
I mean, the song Cisgender, it has that chorus. I'm not cisgender. I'm not binary trans. I don't want to be a girl. I don't want to be a man. Was it liberating to write and to sing that? Or was it frustrating to an extent to have to spell it out like that?
Well, it was extremely liberating, but, again, I've always had to spell it out like that, right? So it's like past frustration, you know what I mean? It's more so like, let me put this in a song so I don't have to constantly, explain, because I am tired, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it felt nice to kind of like immortalize it in this way that feels correct to me. And like knowing that like putting it into a song like this would definitely immortalize it, I'm glad that I, again, waited. Like, it's not, I've said in a lot of interviews, it's not lost on me that, like, I'm kind of, like, tackling these things on my 8th record. You know what I mean? I wanted to make sure that it was, like, super nuanced and that I won't cringe, like, 8 years later, when I, like, hear the song. And so it was, like, really important for me to make sure that it was done correctly.
Yeah. And it's incredibly passionate vocal performance on that song. What was it like recording that song, Cisgender?
Well, that note came out when I was recording the demo. And when that note came out, I was scared because I didn't plan for it. This is
the high note at the end? Like the
high note at the end. I didn't plan for it. I really didn't. Like, because Cisgender was the last song that we finished before we went into tracking. It had a completely different vibe at first, but we just couldn't like nail it down. So me and Isaac, my producer, Hollow Comment, I was like, let's just throw it away. And let's just like redo the music from the beginning. And like, that's a rare thing for me. I don't think I've ever really done that. And I was like, what's a vibe that's missing for the record? Like, blah, blah. And then I was like, oh, like, it would be nice if we just kind of had like an industrial metal song, like something that's like more straightforward metal.
Yeah.
And then so he agreed. And then so I got my guitar, tuned it down to open D and wrote those chords, recorded the guitar, and just like, it was the same vocal melody and it just happened to fit perfectly on top of the new chords. So I was like, great. And then since, I don't know, I guess I was feeling the metal energy and I was at my aunt's house at this point and, they were all gone. So I guess I was feeling adventurous. I was like, let's just go for it. And it came out of me and I was like, oh my God, like, keep going, Shamir, keep going. You're recording. And, obviously Isaac loved it and it, had to make the final cut and it did.
Yeah. How's it performing that live, particularly that section?
It feels athletic.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm doing it live because I refuse to dodge it. And it gets easier every time I do it. I'm perfecting my technique each time I do it. But, a lot of people don't understand how, like, when you're singing, especially when you're singing correctly, it's a full body thing. You know what I mean? Like, you also have to be relatively physically fit to be a good singer, I think, to some extent. Like, I'm not saying I'm the most fit, you know what I mean? I mean, to like some extent. And every time by the end of that song, I feel like I was running.
Wow.
I feel like I like ran a mile. Yeah. Like, I'm like, I like my body kind of aches, but like not like in a unhealthy bad way. You know what I mean? Like we did a couple crunches and it's like, ooh,
You got to take a break after that song live. That's where you change your guitar.
Oh, it's always It's always at the end of the set. Like you can't start with that song. It's always at the end of the set.
There's another song on the album called Father, which is a very powerful song about your relationship, presumably with your father, and also your mother in there as well. And it ends at a real place of acceptance with the lines, "I'm finally ready to go at it alone." What inspired that song and what was that journey like to get to that point at the end of the song?
Well, yeah, I mean, that, I think it's a sentiment that everyone can relate to in the sense that, eventually, we have to cut the umbilical cord. But it's a little bit more specific for me when I was writing it because I was coming from a perspective of I have really young parents. And I like to explain it, or what I call it, is the Gilmore Girls syndrome.
Okay.
My mom had me at like 19 and I think my dad was like 21. So like, they were kids themselves and I've always kind of like looked at them more as siblings than maybe parents, you know what I mean? As I came of age, I also had to, deal with some of their immature things as well. And kind of like that feeling of me getting older and like me becoming the adult and becoming the adult that I want to be, it's also kind of like making peace with the fact that like in some ways I'm going to even bypass them, and there's going to be like times where they can't absolutely do anything for me at all. You know what I mean? Like, and even in some ways, like maybe even I have to be their parent. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And so that's kind of like where I was coming from. Just like, love my parents, you know what I mean? But just like the sad realization of like, as I become more and more of an adult, they can't be something that I inspire to.
Right.
Like,
that's an interesting dynamic. You mentioned the Gilmore Girls just there and the fact that your parents were quite young. How do you think that, and you probably don't have a perspective because you wouldn't know any different, but do you know how that impacted your childhood growing up with young parents?
Yeah, because I never looked up to my parents. You know what I mean? They always felt a little bit more like peers, and like, don't get me wrong, like they they still disciplined me, and, I still was grounded, and I still, the normal things, but it almost felt more like cosplay. You know what I mean? Like,
Sure.
I would only like not rebuttal or like not be an asshole about it out of respect. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And not everyone feels that as a child. You know what I mean? Like me obeying my parents just out of respect. You know what I mean? Which I guess that is like the thing, but like I feel like it was a conscious decision for me to obey them out of respect, as opposed to like a lot of people when they get in trouble with their parents, it's like a conditioning.
Right.
And like it didn't feel like a conditioning for me. It just felt like, I'll play along with this dynamic for y'all so y'all can feel like parents. You know what I mean?
You're doing it for their sake.
Yeah, exactly.
So it sounds like you had a certain sort of wisdom when you were quite young, or a perspective on that relationship. What were you like as a child?
Yeah. I think another version of like what I was talking about is that, again, even though, my parents did discipline me, they didn't have to discipline me much. You know what I mean? And I remember a lot of times growing up when I was like really, really young, people would go up to my mom. And one time I vividly remember that there was a classmate of mine's parent who had chaperoned a field trip. And she happened to meet my mom for the first time and was like, "Oh, are you Shamir's mom?" And she was like, "Yeah." And she was just like, "You did such a great job with him. Like, out of all the kids, he was like the most well behaved, and like,
Nice.
I chaperoned and like blah, 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 blah." She was like, "Thank you." And I remember even at that young age been like, why are you complimenting her? She did nothing. Like, I did that because I did that. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
there was, like, my mom didn't have, like, this, like, whole, like, like, parenting guru thing going on about her. You know what I mean? She was a young mom, like, whatever. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Again, not to discount her, but, like, I knew even then, I'm like, she didn't have anything to do with that. Like, that's just what I want. I like to be easy. I like to be chill. Like, and I've always been like that as a child. And I think I take that into to now even been an artist, you know what I mean? Because I think in a lot of ways people expect artists to be difficult, and I pride myself on being known as the non-difficult artist. You know what I mean?
Sure. What did your parents do?
My mom is a real estate agent, and my dad is a stoner. Like, I don't like he's a football coach, and he does delivery. He works for UPS.
Right, gotcha. Okay. And you were raised in Las Vegas, and I guess we, particularly being in Australia, we have a very Hollywood idea about what Las Vegas is, the bright lights, the strip. What's it like to live there? What was it like to grow up there?
A lot more rural than a lot of people would think. You know what I mean? I grew up across the street from a pig farm, like, most of my life.
Right.
Because North Las Vegas is just like this super sprawling and, deserted because, no one lives on the strip.
Yeah.
The strip is just, for tourists. So once you get outside the strip, you're like, oh, we are in the desert. You know what I mean? So, I feel my upbringing feels in a lot of ways like a lot more country than like city. Like I think a lot of people think that like my upbringing was like, that I'm like a city rat. And I'm like, no.
Right. Is there a mindset that comes with being in the desert?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, have you ever been in 100 and I don't know because you probably use Celsius, right?
Yeah, so I
Have you
think
ever?
that's probably about 40 degrees or something. So
Yeah, that's like 30, 40. But I'm saying, have you ever been? I was gonna see. I got cut off. I was gonna say, have you ever been in 120
oh,
degree Fahrenheit weather? You know what I mean? You just have to change your whole mindset of this, like everything. You know what I
okay.
mean? And I was saying this to someone that, like, summer break kind of sucked growing up. You know what I mean? Because we couldn't go out during the day because it was too hot. And
Yeah.
if we are in the, if we got lucky and our parents let us go out at night, then that's the only time that we really got to do anything.
Okay. And am I right in thinking that you're also raised in the Nation of Islam, or there was a
Yeah.
Muslim upbringing there?
Yeah. Yeah. Both. Yeah.
How did that, like, what are your memories? Because I understand that you're not part of that anymore, or you don't.
No.
How did it impact your life growing up?
I will say I actually wrote this for a zine recently, a piece about how in a very extremely offhanded way being raised in a nation of Islam maybe contributed to my innate confidence in a way, maybe mostly because, like, when you grow up in a black nationalist situation, you're almost not aware. Like, you are aware, but you also aren't aware that, like, you're oppressed as a black person. You know what I mean? Like, essentially, it's like been raised as a black supremacist. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so it was really hard once I started to, like, enter the world as an adult and start to really feel the weight of oppression as a black person. Because, like, yeah, being raised in a nation of Islam, when you're, like, young, you don't understand, like, they tell you that the black man is under attack, but, like, also when you're in the midst of that community, it doesn't feel that way. You know what I mean? It's weird. So, yeah, basically I say that, like, in almost kind of an offhanded good way, I've never felt inferior for being black, and I think that definitely has helped me with my confidence in some way. But yeah, as I get older, I definitely feel the weight of that oppression, like, more. And I almost kind of, like, feel bamboozled because I grew up in a nation of Islam. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They don't prepare you how to, like, handle oppression. And, like, that's what's so annoying about them, among other things, like, anti-Semitism and a bunch of other bad things about them.
Sure. Did you make a conscious decision to stop?
Yes. At 12 years old, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why?
Because at 12 years old, I recognized bigotry. It's as simple as that. Like, like, sometimes I understand, like, the age thing. It's like, a certain age, I didn't know, like, blah, 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 blah. Which is, like, sure. But at 12 years old, like, I felt the hate. And I was like, this is not okay.
Right.
And I told my mom, and I was like, this is not okay. I don't want to do this.
Okay.
And that actually sparked something in her. And, now she's a witch who has, like, a pentagram tattooed on her chest.
Wow. Quite the turnaround.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
So where does music, and your parents, they were quite young, yeah, as you mentioned, so I presume that if they did they love music? And
Yeah.
what kind of music was in the house? Was it music that was perhaps different to what your friends' parents might have been listening to, given the age that they were?
Of course, but my mom, she listens to music for nostalgia. So growing up, I mostly only heard, like, older stuff that probably, like, someone who has, like, older parents probably still be listening to. Because she mostly just only listened to stuff from her childhood. So that was, like, a lot of, like, 70s and 80s R&B stuff. And then sometimes 90s stuff from, like, her teens as well. But she really, really liked the older stuff.
Okay.
And then my mom's twin is the one who really had, like, the more varied, because she wrote music herself. And yeah, she, like, introduced me to, like, country and rock and everything. And she listened to, like, everything. Yeah. And my mom does too, but, like, my aunt really is a little bit more of, like, a music nerd.
Okay. And is it true that you used to sit in on the recording sessions that your aunt was doing?
Yeah.
How did that impact you? What was it like seeing music being created?
I mean, I'm here before you, talking to you.
Do you think
as a musician? You know what I mean? I think it stuck. You know what I mean? I think it was extremely influential. Yeah, because it was really cool. Like, not everybody has, like, had upfront experience of, like, the music making process at such a young age. Like, I was, like, in kindergarten and, like, maybe even younger then, and I would just, like, sit there and, like, attentively watch them write songs. And then I would go back by myself and, like, figure out how to do that myself. Yeah, and then I started writing lyrics and melodies before I even like picked up instrument, and then when I felt confident enough in that, that's when I picked up guitar at 9, and
Okay.
then I've been writing my own songs since.
Yeah. What did songwriting give you back then? Even before you picked up a guitar and you were just writing poems or lyrics, and then when you pick up a guitar, what did songwriting give you?
I mean, an outlet, you know what I mean? And I felt like, once I was able to, learn my first couple of chords and starting to put, songs together and arrange songs and, have something super tangible. Because that was my aunt's downfall. And I didn't want to be like my aunt because, she couldn't play anything, she couldn't sing. And so she would basically like, network with musicians around Vegas because she basically started off with poems and she wanted her poems to turn into songs. So she would just like network with artists and like, even though she, found a community and like everything, I know that it was hard for her not being a musician herself. So, I learned from that and I was like, while I'm young, I'm going to learn an instrument. So I begged my mom for a guitar when I was 9. And she brought me a guitar and a Guitar for Dummies book. And the rest is history. I taught myself how to play guitar.
Nice. And was country music your actual first outlet? That was what you were first playing?
Yeah, I think, there's definitely a huge country music scene in Vegas. As I said, it's very rural energy. So, and then, my first guitar was an acoustic. Like a full body, like it didn't even have a cutaway. That's why I ended up playing upside down. Yeah, I started writing country and folk stuff.
Okay. And you performed those live in front of people?
Yeah, I used to go to honky tonks and do the whole thing, yeah.
At what age?
I started doing that like my freshman year of high school.
Which is about, what, 50? Like, what's
14, 15.
Okay.
But then I also did like middle school talent shows too. The first time that I sang and played guitar in front of an audience of people was my 7th grade talent show. And I sang Who Will Save Your Soul by Joel.
Right. Did it feel natural? Were you comfortable?
Yeah. Yeah. And my school didn't even have a guitar program. So it was like, how does he know how to play guitar? It's like, I taught myself. Yeah. And I remember my dean was just like, since I taught myself, I didn't know that I was playing upside down. And he was the one who told me that I was playing upside down. And he was like freaking out about it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Wow. So how do you then progress into, because I know you moved into a punk band when you were about 16. How does country merge into punk?
Just, when you are young and, maybe that was kind of like the first time that again, ever since I left the Nation of Islam, you get hit more with the realization that you are an oppressed person. And, I got tired of being black and queer and trying to do the country thing and like not feeling accepted and feeling outward racism. And in turn, that made me angsty, especially since I'm already, going through puberty.
Yeah.
And the punk scene just felt a little bit more, inviting than, the country scene now. Now the country scene is like, way more diverse than it was, when I first started. Like I never thought that I would see like what country has become now. I never thought I would see that. Like that just, my young brain couldn't even fathom that. And I was just like, I'm tired of fighting. I don't want to do it anymore. And so that's why I always made it a point to represent my countryside anytime that I could throughout my entire discography.
That must have been terribly upsetting and confusing at that age to feel that and to feel ostracized from a community at 14 or 15. Great that you found punk and hopefully that was more accepting, but that's still a lot to deal with. Was music the way that you dealt with it? Did you have people that you could talk to that would help you with this?
No, I've just really started unpacking that like within the last year. The trauma of, I had like this epiphany, like I think like the end of like last summer. And I remember I called my aunt. I was just like, oh my God, I just like had this epiphany that like I had not worked through the trauma of like basically feeling pushed out of country music at such a young age. You know what I mean? Because I just kind of like, just put it all in the punk and kind of just like rammed through. And I think, definitely doing like, the few country things here and there throughout my career definitely like, help and provided me with a bit of solace. But yeah, I haven't really started like truly unpacking that until like very recently.
Wow. One of the pivotal things around that time, if I understand correctly, is that I believe did your stepdad give you a drum machine? And that,
yes.
And that sort of pushed you, this is while you're in your punk days, and this kind of made you, or pushed you into pop a little bit more? Is that the sort of the transition? That was the point where you had a drum machine and started experimenting in that world?
Wow, I can't believe you knew that. This is like a Nardwar moment. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe you knew that. Yeah, so my stepfather, and he's also the reason why I know how to rap as well, because he's a rapper.
Yeah.
And he gave me his old drum machine because he had upgraded to a DAW. I think he was using like Fruity Loops. And I just took it from him just because I'm like, oh, this is like another piece of equipment that I had. Because it was like really funny because like, he had like his little piece of the house that was like his little studio, and then like I had like my own like little like bedroom set up, and we never crossed paths. But sometimes we would talk about what we were doing. You know what I mean? Like sometimes we were like, he's like, "What are you up there doing?" And I'm like, "I'm doing this. That's not, what are you doing? That sounds cool." Like whatever. But it was really funny because we just always, it never merged. And he gave me that, and I was just, really experimenting with it. I was still in the band, and like we didn't have a live drummer, so I used it a lot in a very like primitive way. I didn't even like use it to its full capacity. I didn't start using it to write pop demos until I became friends with my friend Bree towards the end of freshman year. After already like, I can't do this country shit anymore. And she was the person who introduced me to pop music. Because I really had not listened to pop music like that outside of just like things that I heard on the radio here and there.
Yeah.
But she like introduced me to kind of like the more like alt pop stuff that like obviously would, eventually become my sound, like Lana Del Rey and Natalia Kills and all of that stuff. And, she was like my go-to person to like give me all those recommendations. Oh, and Marina and the Diamonds, obviously. Like Marina and Diamonds' first record came out like my freshman year as well. And so I was just like really blown away by like all the cooler art, like non-radio art pop stuff that like I felt more just like connected to.
Yeah. And so instantly that's where you're drawn to in terms of what you're creating.
Yeah, it felt like the best version of myself in an accessible way.
Okay.
Because it was really, going from country to punk. I wasn't sure that I would ever be able to do something accessible.
Yeah.
And then once I kind of like got introduced to alternative pop music, that's when I was like, okay, maybe I can do this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then so that's when I started, getting more use out of the drum machine and started making pop demos. And honestly, just like on the side, just like for fun. Like I was still in the band, and the band was still like my main gig. And like, we got like some local press, and we went to South by Southwest. We were still in high school. Like we literally had to take time off to like go to South by Southwest. And
nice.
And then the only reason why any of those like pop demos came to light is because after high school graduation, we had to take hiatus because I started working 2 weeks out of high school, and I just like had to just like get used to working. Like it was such a quick transition. It was like I graduated, and 2 weeks later I got like a job that like I happened to just like do an interview for like a week before graduation. And so I was like, oh, I got to figure out my schedule. So like let's just like do like fun like little side projects in the meantime while I figure out like my schedule, and we can start like writing together again. And my band member, she started rapping, and then I did the pop thing, and the pop thing turned into me being before you right now.
We have to take a quick break, but don't go anywhere because we'll be back shortly with more from Shamir. Welcome back to Humans of Music and my interview with Shamir. You released Northtown, the EP, in 2014. How long after leaving school is that?
So Northtown came out like March of 2014.
Yeah.
I graduated June 2013, so less than a year.
Oh, so it's pretty quick.
Very quick, yes.
Okay. And so had you decided, I mean, you mentioned you started working after 2 weeks. At some point, had you gone, no, that's not for me. Music is what I'm going to do, and I'm just going to dedicate myself to it.
No. Like, I didn't care. Like, I didn't think that it would turn into this.
Okay.
I did it. Like, I really, truly did it. Like, I sent the demos over to like a handful of very tiny labels. You know what I mean? I wasn't sending my stuff to like Electric, or like I wasn't, not Electric, Electra, or like, Capitol Records. Like I was sending it to like small like tape labels. One of them ended up being God Mode, and then God Mode flew me out to New York to record some stuff January of 2014. And I was like, okay, free trip to New York. I had never been to New York. And when I got back to Vegas, I continued working. Actually, I started a new job. That's when I started working Top Shop. And then like 2 weeks later, after I started Top Shop, one of the first tracks that we recorded got Best New Track on Pitchfork.
Right.
And then like immediately the next day, all these majors started hitting me up. Like it was like literally the next day. So, I didn't make the decision. The decision was made for me.
Yeah.
Basically.
How did you react? What did you know about anything at that point?
Oh, I had nothing. I had a mini spiral. I had a mini spiral moment. Yeah, it was terrifying. Like, it was terrifying, actually. I just felt like it was the beginning of me just, like, getting, like, wiped up by, like, a storm.
Right.
Like, that's what it felt like. And that's what it was.
Yeah. And then that storm, of course, continued when you signed to XL and released Ratchet, your debut album. And the album did very well, but it seemed you have quite a complicated relationship with that album, is how I would look at it from the outside. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, that's a perfect word for it, complicated. Because like a lot of people think that I hate it or that I resent it, and I don't. I don't at all. Like, it's a good record. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not... It would have never came out if I wasn't proud of it. You know what I mean? It just wasn't like the best representation of me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like my instincts. But like, it's not a bad record. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm not going to release trash. You know what I mean?
I mean, the song On the Regular, which was such a big hit. Again, I think complicated is perhaps the best word for that, because it was so successful. But if I understand it correctly, you almost did it as a joke. You started rapping on it, played it to your producer, and he was like, yep, that's the one. And you were shocked.
I was very shocked, yeah. I was like, I literally wrote it to be an asshole because like... Yeah, because he really just liked the instrumental, and I didn't mind the instrumental. Like, I liked it too, but I was like, I can't sing on this. Like, it's just way too rhythmic. And yeah, so I kind of was like, let me be an asshole and just like rap on it to show him how rhythmic it is, like how much I literally can't sing on this. And at this point, he didn't even know I could rap, or like even knew that was even something that I could even attempt. So I was like, he's going to hear me rap and he's going to be like, ill gross, like never do that again. But at least you attempted to like do something to this track, but like, we're just going to throw it away. That was like my thought process as I wrote that song in 15 minutes.
Wow. So what do you learn from that experience? Because then that song is the one that gets pushed out there, and you end up performing on Colbert, and it gets a lot of streams. Did you learn from that to think, right, okay, if you're not into something, don't even joke record it? Yeah,
exactly. That's what I learned from it. You can joke record it, but just keep it to yourself. Like, that's what I learned from that. I learned that I have to always, when it comes to my art, do things with intention.
Okay. Were you able to enjoy that period at all? I mean, there was success there. There was acceptance there. Was there, despite that whirlwind and that spiraling, were you able to at least enjoy it at all?
I don't know. Like, it was cool to have those experiences, and that I would never take for granted. But I definitely would have loved feeling better during those experiences. And as I have the second chance to experience some of those experiences that I experienced at the beginning, they feel better now because I feel better now. And I do wish that I felt better then. So I almost just feel indifferent about that time because it was just so much compartmentalizing and just trying to make it through the day.
Right.
Which
must, as you said, you got a second opportunity to experience it now, which must make it all the more sweeter, I would hope.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, it's way sweeter now. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so it just really goes to show, I guess to answer your question, no. You know what I mean? It just goes to show how much I eat, no matter how much I tried to convince myself that I was enjoying it, it wasn't.
Okay. And then there was a well-documented period after that where you wrote a couple of albums, recorded them, and then trashed them. And then you recorded and mastered Hope, your second album, in one weekend. Put it on SoundCloud for free. Didn't tell your management. What were you trying? Were you trying to sabotage your career? Were you trying to just push reset?
Sure. Yeah, push reset. That's what that was. That's what Hope was. Hope was a big fat boop reset button.
Okay.
Like, that's literally what it was. Yeah, because I was just like, I can do this. You know what I mean? Legally, I can do this. Because, I was told my label dropped me. And, and I tried to, do things by the book. But at that point, I ended up scrapping 2 records just because I had to keep fighting to be like, I'm not doing something similar to this. Like, I'm not going to continue the legacy of Ratchet, in any way, shape, or form. And we have to get that out of our heads. And no one wanted to accept that. And so, I had to do Hope. You know what I mean? Like, I wish it didn't come at the cost of just like, my mental health and like so much other things. Because I was like literally like triggered to make Hope. Like, the night that I decided to make Hope was the night that I got into a huge fight with the producer that I was working with. Like, I had never been in a fight like that. Like, I don't like to get into fights like that. And what's even more frustrating to me is that, like, I pride myself on being easy. And I pride myself on being easy to work with. So that just goes to show, like, how nasty I was being treated. You know what I mean? And how no one trusted my vision. And how belittled I was. And, I was like, I'm done. I'm done with this. And, like, and Hope is one of those records. It hit reset in the sense that, like, I think reset is the perfect word, right? Because, like, that reset could have been my last record. And I wrote it like it could have been my last record. You know what I mean? And, by the grace of the universe, it wasn't. But that's what I felt, possibly. You know what I mean? Like, I thought that this was going to scare everyone away. In a lot of ways it did. But I didn't think it would kind of start this new chapter.
Yeah. And it did. As much as it scared some people away, it also found acceptance as well. People liked it. Did that vindicate for you your vision and give you a confidence or a self-belief that you could do this yourself?
For sure, yeah. So, it touched all the right people. You know what I mean? And, like, a week later, got hospitalized, got diagnosed bipolar. And then, I get out the hospital. And then that's when I really kind of, like, saw the love that the record was getting. Because, I was in the hospital, I had my phone. And one of the people that was, like, proudly praising it was, Father Daughter Records, who ended up releasing the following record, Revelations. And that was just, like, literally because of that. Like, literally, I think they literally, like, tweeted me. Like, they was like, heard you drop from XL, we'll release your next record. And that's how that happened. Yeah, just via Twitter.
Yeah, but that must have felt amazing. That must have felt really, after everything you'd been through. You mentioned you were hospitalized after a psychotic episode. Bipolar, you're diagnosed with bipolar, the fallout from XL. To get that acceptance and to have someone reach out and say, hey, we like what you're doing on your own terms, let's release it. That must have been huge.
Especially since I was already such a huge fan of Father Daughter. You know what I mean? Like, because that's the music that I was listening to already. You know what I mean? And to kind of like hear the label to have the label that released music that inspired you to make Hope. You know what I mean? Like, that was huge. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That bipolar diagnosis, is there an element of relief that comes with the diagnosis? That's
for sure.
Yeah.
Because then you know what's up, and then you can develop those tools and mechanisms to, continue your path of mental health and well-being.
How do you practice mental well-being?
Well, honestly, my music now. I think that's one of the main reasons why I'm so prolific. When I first got out of hospital, one of the main things that me and my therapist worked on is fully transmuting my energy and trauma and like everything into my art again, which was like definitely like the type of therapy that I needed because again, like I was at a point where I didn't even know if I wanted to do music anymore. You know what I mean? Because the power that I felt through my music was taken away from me. And so, you know, working through that and then working on like gaining my power back through my music ended up becoming, you know, my biggest sense of like therapy and like my biggest, you know, therapeutic tool.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's a way for me to like psychoanalyze myself without it feeling like psychoanalyzing.
Sure.
I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that you mentioned that's why you became so prolific, and you did, I think, 5 albums in 4 years after that.
Something like that. Sure.
Around that period.
I lose count.
You lost count, which is you know, very prolific. And a lot of that was DIY as well. What were the upsides of that for you, and what were the downsides of doing it DIY?
It was only upside. You know what I mean? Because I knew that like it was one of two things, and like that's why, you know, I didn't want to do album cycles and like work with a label and everything. Like I just threw a lot of those on Bandcamp until everyone begged me to put it on streaming. And like that's how that whole like time worked. Yeah, that was on purpose because like I knew that I was only first of all making these records for me.
Yeah.
But then also I knew that it was me also developing myself as an artist. And like, you know, carving out this sound that I like felt, you know, that I fought so hard for. And I wanted to, you know, do it in a public way, but also like not in an outwardly public way. So yeah, I was just like, you know, I'll do them myself until I feel ready that I can like make something truly, fully accessible. And as you know, I didn't feel that way until Self-Titled.
Yes.
And that's why, you know, Self-Titled was the first record where I still self-released it, but it was like the first record that like I did like a full like, you know, press cycle for.
Yes. Okay. And then in 2019, you started Accidental Popstar Records. Given everything that you've just been talking about and all the lessons you would have learned in the years leading up to that, do you use that experience to nurture talent through the label? Is that the idea behind that label?
Exactly. Again, not, you know, it didn't start off that way, but it definitely became another kind of like, I guess, like a healthy trauma response. Like, because obviously, you know, my entrance into the music industry was so terrible. So in turn, it feels really great to be able to like, you know, mentor new talent and shepherd new talent to the industry in a way better and more ethical way than I was. But it didn't start that way. You know what I mean? I was working with 2 artists. The first artist I was working with, I was going to shop the record for her and see if someone else wanted to release it. But then this other artist came along who ended up being Grant Pavel.
Yeah.
And I produced his debut EP. And then I was like, okay, I have like these 2 releases. Instead of like shopping 2 releases, what if I just released them both?
All right. When you say you're mentoring them, what kind of advice do you pass on to them?
I don't know, whatever they need. Like, you know, and I give them the best advice that I can. And if I don't, you know, if I don't know what to do, then, you know, I definitely, you know, have other friends that I can reach out to. And that's all. I just kind of want I see myself as like a resource.
Right.
I have no real agenda. Like I want them to be the artists that they want to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of there to like contain that and organize it, basically.
Right.
But I'm not trying to impose anything on them.
No. Kind of feels like giving them the opportunity that you would have liked to just be the artist.
Exactly. But it's also just like this level of empathy. I did a tweet not too long ago where I said like something along the lines of like, you know, we're about to have our first, like, it's only been 3 years since we launched, and like we're about to do a joint official South by Southwest showcase with Kill Rock Stars. And like, that was just like, you know, I never thought that we'd be here so early. And it's like, it feels so good. And it really validates me that like, there is an alternative world where I did not have to be exploited the way that I was. And all of those people are wrong. And even up until very recently, I couldn't even say they were wrong. You know what I mean? I always like chalked it up to like, maybe I was miscommunicating or like blah, 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 blah. But I say all that to say that like in those tweets, I said, you know, it makes me feel good to develop artists, and like it makes me also sad that like the act of artist development is just like almost obsolete in the music industry now. And I think it's because like artist development, when done right, is a really empathetic job and like a really empathetic thing. And the industry as it is now obviously is not known for listening to artists. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's all I do. I just listen to them. That's literally all I do.
Yeah. And that development is so crucial. You think about how many bands hit their straps on their third or fourth record. And it's how sad it is that some artists don't get that opportunity now to grow into the artists they become and to really make their great work that really represents them. I think it's terribly sad.
It is sad, yeah. A lot of people thought that maybe I was that type of artist. You know what I mean? That I like, after Ratchet I had died down, but like, little did they know I was just starting over. You know what I mean? And then like now a lot of those like naysayers are like, oh, Shamir's just like on an incline. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, because that's what an artist should be. You shouldn't burn out. And like it maybe seemed like at a point that I did. Well, I did burn out. You know what I mean? But I took the time to regroup and get myself together and get my life together and get my artistry together. So now I'm like inclining, and I making sure that I'm only incline, and I make sure of that by like staying healthy and being true to myself and being true to my artistry.
Nice. As you've clearly had a lot of growth over the past couple of years and seem to be at a fantastic place now, the idea of being a role model for a variety of minority groups feels like something early on in your career maybe was thrust upon you. But do you feel at a place now where that's less the case? Or did you ever feel that was the case? Like, do you feel more confident and more comfortable in a role model position?
Yeah, I feel more confident and comfortable now. Obviously, I didn't when I was 19, 20, 21. You know what I mean? And it was hard then. And, now that I'm older and wiser, yeah, I definitely, it feels better. And I'm glad that, again, I was honest with myself and, I took the time to learn things as opposed to pretend to be a face for something. I think a lot of artists are forced to, be the face of something because of who they are, and they kind of just like pretend. You know what I mean? Because that's what I was advised to do. You know what I mean? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to pretend to. It's going to sound weird saying, ally, but like pretend to be the ally that people want me to be, at least. Like, I rather say, I don't know, and like be like, I'm not the ally you think I am, but I'm willing to become the ally you think I should be or could be. And it's made me a better ally now.
Yeah.
Why would I be as like queer experience? You know what I mean? Like other queer people, or I owe it to other queer people to be as nuanced as possible when I'm talking about my queerness or my blackness or any of my intersections. You know what I mean? As opposed to like saying the perfect mindless, like media trained answer.
Shamir, last thing. Jaxsta is all about giving credit where credit is due. Are there people you'd give credit to for helping you get where you are today?
Yes, well, Father Daughter Records, obviously.
Yeah.
And, Isaac for this record, Hollow Comet for, again, listening to me and, really understanding me as an artist. Headroom Studios in North Philly. Always got my back.
Nice. Kyle
Pooley at Headroom Studios, who produced a lot of Self-Titled and also engineered a lot of Heterosexuality. Danny, also at Headroom. Danny Murillo, who's also at Headroom, but also plays drums on, again, both records, Self-Titled and Heterosexuality. And then, all my accidental babies as well. They inspire me.
Nice.
They do. Grant Pavel, Macy Rodman, Pull Blood, our new artist that's releasing her single next week, Ladifa. Like, that's another thing too. Like, a lot of people think that like, it's a one-way street when it comes to like me and the artist on Accidental, but like they inspire me so much.
Nice. Shamir, thanks so much for your time. It's been so great to chat with you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that's it for another episode of Humans of Music. A big thanks to Shamir and thank you for listening. Just a reminder that Shamir's latest record, Heterosexuality, is out now. If you have any feedback on the show or suggestions on who you'd like me to interview, or even if you just want to say hello, please drop me a line at humansofmusic@jaxsta.com. That's humansofmusic, one word, at Jaxsta, JAXSTA.com. This episode was mixed by Lachlan Mitchell from Parliament Studios in Annandale, and the incidental music and theme song were written and performed by Sam Lockwood. Please remember to subscribe to the Humans of Music podcast so you never miss an episode, or even better, share it amongst your friends and rate and review it. And remember, next time you need to know who wrote a song, who produced a song, who engineered it, who played on it, who sang on it, who did anything on it, head to Jaxsta.com for all your official music credit information. Until the next episode of Humans of Music, I'm Rod Yates. Thanks for listening.